morning, everybody. We're just going to go ahead and get started a little early so that Makar can have enough time because there is a wedding here at noon. So I don't think Makar needs an introduction at this point anymore. Like, we've been waiting for this. So thank you so much for coming.
Does this microphone? Okay, it does work. Good. All right. Well, great. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So it's good to be among you guys, as always, and it's so nice to hear that there's going to be a wedding here. I mean, the church is active and a lot of great things going on. So this is probably one of the most complex topics to talk about in a non-technical or non-academic setting, because it's the type of stuff that you would spend a lot of time on in therapy, okay? Like, this is what this is, right? Which is common ways that your family of origin interferes with your marriage. Let me just say that again. Common ways that your family of origin interferes with your marriage and your family life. And just to make sure you know what family of origin means, it means the family you grew up in, right? And of course, there's a lot of different exceptional cases, like if you were adopted, that could kind of make things a bit, kind of complicated in terms of like which family of origin is my family of origin and all that stuff. Or, some people travel to another country when they're young. That can also complicate things. So I want to discuss some of the common but harder to articulate interferences from our family of origin. What I'm not going to spend time on is like when your mother-in-law asks you to spend time doing this. That's not what I'm going to spend time on. Okay, that stuff, we all kind of get it, like whatever. We'll deal with that later, right? Another time, but we only have 45 minutes, right? Also, just because I'm using the word interferences or interfere doesn't mean that your family of origin is intending to interfere. Okay? So I'm saying your family of origin interferes with your married life, but doesn't mean that they're intending to interfere. Usually, nobody's waking up in the morning saying, hey, how can I interfere with my child's marriage? No parent is waking up trying to do that, right? In the same way, no husband is waking up and saying, hey, how can I make my wife's life miserable today? No, but we still do it, right? We still, hurt each other and harm each other, but we're not doing it intentionally most of the time. Now, before we get into it, because we're going to talk about 4 ways, but 4 different common interferences, I want to tell you another 4 ways that you could respond to this talk. Okay? For some of us, this talk will have a few surprises. And this applies to those, we'll have few surprises, like not many surprises. And that's going to apply to those who have done therapy or done lots of reflection and internal work. But this doesn't usually apply to most people because sadly, most people have not done the internal work that they need to do, right? But maybe if you have done lots of internal work, you're not going to have a lot of surprises. The other group is some of us, for some of us, this talk may be offensive, or at a minimum, very confusing, because you do not allow yourself to see any bad in your family of origin. For example, if maybe someone in your family of origin has passed away, or experienced circumstances that you have a lot of sympathy for. Usually what happens, God forbid, but if someone passes away, you kind of like now make them a saint, right? Like, my father could do no wrong, my father was this, my father was that, my father was that. It's also common for you to have a hard time seeing bad in your family if your family had a very public life, right? Like you could think there's a bunch of people, especially priest families, for example, in our community, but many people have a very public life. And so you've tried to avoid creating bad attention by turning a blind eye to unhealthy things. Or, which is also common, you grew up in a very tough family of origin situation, but things got a lot better. And so you're trying to suppress the acknowledgement that bad happened in the past because you don't know what to do with it, right? Like I'm working with a couple, the young man, very difficult life growing up, but things are good now with his dad, right? So he doesn't want to spend a lot of time thinking about how things were bad, even though things were bad and they really affected him, right? And it's still affecting him now. But he doesn't want to think about the bad stuff because he doesn't want to rock the boat of all the good stuff that's going on now. You guys get what I'm saying? Right? This is complex stuff, guys, all right? So just try to stay with me. I know it's Sunday morning and all that, right? Okay, now, so you said the first group is people who have done a lot of self-reflection and therapy, not most of us. And those people, you're not going to have a lot of surprises in this talk. The second group is people who might be offended or at a minimum confused because they don't allow themselves to see bad in their family of origin. The third group, which hopefully is all of us, is for those, this group will be sobering, validating, and insightful. You may find explanations for why certain things are happening in your life. Your spouse seems to be running into a wall, which is you. And maybe you're going to find some insight here. Maybe you're being triggered in a specific way so frequently, and you might find out why. Maybe you're responding to your children so sharply at times, and you might find out why. And lastly, there's this other group. Sorry, I know it's a long intro, but whatever. So this talk may not feel very relevant because for the very small percentage of us, I am not in this group. Your family of origin was and continues to be very healthy. And this is not common. It's not common, okay? If you're in this category, please learn still, because this applies to almost everyone you interact with, maybe even your spouse. And keep the healthy stuff going for the generations after you to whom you have a responsibility. And the last thing I want to say to intro this is that there's one special group here that I want to address, which is parents of children who have already launched out of the home, right? And this group, you may be very sad and have grief over lost opportunity. Maybe you realize like, oh my gosh, my kids are in their 20s, 30s now, or 40s, 50s, and I didn't realize I messed up so much, and you may not know what to do. You may be very sad and have grief over the lost opportunity. If at all possible, consider exploring deeper any mistakes you've made and prepare for a conversation, if possible, with your children. It's better to do it while you're alive than for your children to have even more work to do when you're no longer around. And that is a very important message. There are many young people, life would be a lot easier if their father or mother said, hey, I realize that when you were younger, I made this mistake and this mistake and that mistake. Can we talk about that? How did that affect you? Please forgive me. But of course, that usually doesn't happen, especially in our culture. And so the parents have passed away, and now the kid's stuck dealing with it, right? They'll get through it, but it's a lot more work, right? So we don't want that. And because I love all of you, I want to tell you a few truths. All families are imperfect. Almost all parents did harmful things, but almost all parents did not intend to harm their children. Your parents are probably victims too. And that doesn't justify their unhealthy actions, but it does explain them. And the last and the most important truth ever is that God can redeem everything. God can redeem everything. He's called a redeemer for a reason, right? He is the redeemer, right? So put your early life, your childhood, in God's hands and start working. And the work begins with insight and awareness and acceptance, and only you can do the work on you. Only you can do the work on you. Okay? Now we're going to get started. All right? Is everybody with me so far? Are you guys interested in this, or you want me to leave? I could leave. I have a lunch after this. I'm so excited. I'm gonna eat, right? Okay. All right. So we're gonna talk about 4 ways that family of origin interferes with your marriage and family life. Number 1, low emotional intimacy in the home environment. Wow, man, that's a tough one. An emotionally intimate home, tell me if this applies to you. But it probably doesn't. It probably doesn't. It's okay, that's why we're here, right? An emotionally intimate home is one where feelings can be shared safely, from parents to children, children to parents, without judgment initially. Love is communicated explicitly and clearly. Like I remember this week I was talking to a mother and daughter. I said to the daughter, do you say I love you to your mom? The daughter's in her 20s. And she said, no, that's icky. I don't want to say that. It feels so weird, right? Why does it feel weird? Well, at a minimum, it feels weird because it hasn't been done for years, right? So an emotionally intimate home is one where love is communicated explicitly and clearly. There is no manipulation or shaming. Love is not being transacted to lead to specific outcomes. Love is not moving. It's good all the time, no matter what. Very, very important. Everyone is treated with respect. You do not hide the fact that you are imperfect, right? After a few years, like the early, maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, after that, kids got to know the parents are imperfect, right? Otherwise, they can't feel like they could approach their parents until they're perfect. And then there goes a cascade of disasters, right? In an emotionally intimate home, parents, the available parents are always present. I don't just mean physically, but emotionally present, right? So, if you come from a home where emotional intimacy was low, now in the family you're creating, you may be lost. Like you keep hearing this emotional stuff, you're like, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do you mean? Like, be emotional, connect with my kids emotionally, connect with my spouse emotionally. You may find yourself being harsh. Your children are uncooperative, and you don't know what to do about it. You may even accept that you have difficult children. You know that? My children, difficult children. There's no difficult children. There's bad parenting. That's what it is. Just remember that. It's not difficult children. It's bad parenting, right? I didn't say bad parents. I mean, even though bad parenting, I mean, you know, I don't have to make that, like, create that bridge, but you can deal with it later. Your spouse may have resigned emotionally. Your spouse just gave up, just stopped, even hoping that there would be emotional connection in the home. They just resigned emotionally, right? They're still there, still taking the kids to school, still working, whatever. But emotionally, they may have resigned. So, you know, by the way, every one of these could be a whole lecture, but we're just trying to cover the general message, the framework. What do you do about this? What do you do about this? If there was low emotional intimacy in your family of origin. Number 1, force yourself in your family now to express love very clearly. Like, express love in ways where it's very clear what you're doing. By the way, this is not hard, even though it might feel awkward. But it's not hard, right? It's, you know, you could always just say, I love you. You could just say that. It costs nothing, right? You could give a compliment, right? You could, I had a young person tell me recently, my mom came in and started telling me about her childhood. And I was like, oh, how long was your mother talking with you for? Is this talk being recorded, by the way? Or? This is amazing. So no, I said, how long was your mom talking for? And she said, an hour. I said, oh, how did you feel? She said, I felt like I was talking to a friend. And that's a good example of quality time, being used to communicate love, right? Very, very good example. So, another mother just texted me last night and said, my daughter called me on her way from school to tell me about her experience at like some event with her friends. And she said, God heard my prayers, you know? So, the reason I'm saying this is because you have to make sure the love is reaching the other side. You could also ask your children, your spouse, hey, is there a way that I can communicate love better to you or more clearly to you? Well, that question is worth probably like $30,000, right? A minimum, right? You say, is there a way that I can communicate love better to you? By the way, if you feel like, oh, that's an awkward question, that means there's something there. Okay? If you feel like that, you want me to ask that question to my wife, my husband? That's how you know there's gold there, right? Next thing you can do is challenge your own narratives about what is happening in your home. I'm trying to do this quickly, but it's very hard to do this quickly. So, my son is now 19 months old, and one time we were at my mom's home, right, in New York, and he's sitting in a high chair and eating, right? And he's just making these like facial expressions, and my mom just goes, the sha'i, right? The best explanation for that is mischievous, right? Like best translation for that. So I was like, that's very interesting. Like, we don't know what's going on with him. Like, no one's reading his mind. Only God knows what's actually going on. But we just applied a narrative. You know, I was just hanging out with a bunch of friends, and he was on a high chair. You could tell we eat a lot. And he's on a high chair eating, and the friend goes, oh, he's shy. How do we know, right? But whatever narrative you apply to what's happening is the narrative you're going to respond to, right? So if you think your child is being mischievous, you're going to respond to a mischievous child. If you think the child is shy, you're going to respond to a shy child, right? And of course, your response is going to be much more influential than your child's response to you, right? So you have to think to yourself, what's happening in your home? Like you say, oh, because he's jealous. You say that about your husband. Oh, because he's jealous, right? Or because she wants to manipulate me. You don't know she wants to manipulate you. Like, that's a very strong statement that you're saying, right? All right, so challenge your own narratives about what's happening in your home. Ask yourself, what could my family members be feeling? Ask your family members, what are you feeling? And whatever they are feeling, don't guilt them for feeling that way. There is a reason why they are feeling that way. And lastly, if you grew up in a home with low emotional intimacy, please, my beloved brothers and sisters, do not trust your own analysis of what is happening in your home. You're not good at it, okay? I'm telling you because I love you, okay? Like, please, challenge your own analysis, okay? You don't know what's going on because you're not asking any questions, because your parents didn't ask you questions, right? Like, you need to explore, you need to be flexible, you need to withhold judgment, you need to be patient, you need to slow down, you need to consider lots of things. You probably need to get help, right? So that is one way that your family of origin interferes with your marriage. Is everybody with me so far? All right, this is so complex. This is very complex stuff, okay? But we only got 3 more, all right? All right, so number 2, a common way that your family of origin interferes with your marriage. Number 2 is your family of origin had a high-stress home environment. High-stress home environment. Being in a high-stress home environment is usually correlated with low emotional intimacy in the home environment. So the number 1 is highly correlated with number 2, right? There is no life on earth without stresses. Okay, this is earth. This is not heaven. Okay? So on earth, there's a lot of stresses. Okay, everybody has them. Okay? So having a healthy level of stress at home comes from healthy coping with stresses. Like there are stresses, but if the level of stress is healthy, the only way to have that is to cope with stress in a healthy way. Not letting stresses create major disturbances in the emotional stability of the home. The stress levels at home, and please remember this following statement. The stress levels at home do not have to be the sum of the stresses that all the family members are facing. Let me just say that again. The stress levels at home do not have to be the sum of the stresses that all the family members are facing. Meaning, you could be facing a lot of stress as an individual, but the family can be a place where highly stressed people come for refuge and comfort and to help them cope with the stresses they're facing. Because on earth, there is no life without stress. But does your family add to the stress? Or is your family a source of comfort and refuge from the stress? And anyone here who serves in any capacity and supports any friends and family, you know you could feel it when you're in a highly stressed home, when you're talking to someone who is usually stressed out all the time. They're anxious, there's a lot of yelling, there's a lot of reactivity, there's very little time to think, usually there's fatigue, right? There's low fulfillment in life. So if there was low emotional intimacy in your family of origin, then parents' personal stresses could have led to magnified stresses in the home. For example, dad, stressed at work, comes home, is yelling at everyone. Mom is stressed with her mom, right? And so she's coming home and yelling at her husband or whatever, right? Or work? Yeah, mother at work, yeah. Any stress, like just ask yourself, what was the stress path? How did it work? What was the journey of stress in my home growing up? Like, how did it move? Like, what was the path that it came by the time it got into my home, right? Like, it started from my dad here, and maybe this happened with his siblings. Where did it go? Like, how did it travel into my home? Mom, this happened. How did it travel into my home? And again, there's no life without stresses, right? So it's about coping. So what do you do about it? What do you do about if you grew up in a high-stress home environment? Spend some time alone and list out the stresses in your life. By the way, you're going to notice that I'm telling you to spend a lot of time alone, to think first, because low awareness leads to all this stuff, right? The low awareness leads to all this stuff, right? Spend some time alone and list out the stresses in your life. Ask yourself, how stressed out are you? And list out then how you cope with stresses. What do you actually do? Some people do nothing. It's very common. Do nothing. Why? Because you're just going from one thing to the next. You're just moving. You don't do anything with your stress. But you know what? If you don't do anything with your stress does something with you. That's very important. It's not going away. It doesn't vanish, right? You're a human being. That doesn't happen that way, right? So ask your spouse, next step, ask your spouse, how much do you think I allow my stresses to affect our marriage and home life? Another $30,000 question, right? Hey, honey, how much do you think I allow my stresses to affect our marriage and home life? Oh, wow. If you feel awkward, there's a lot of value in that question. Remember that. Whenever you feel that emotional hesitation, that awkwardness, there's gold there. You're going to find something very valuable there. Remember that. That's a very easy sign, an indicator. Then reflect again on how effective your coping mechanisms are and find better ways to cope. Of course, obviously, if possible, change the stressors if you can. But also get external support. Take a walk, physical activity, healthy self-talk. Maybe you need to change the messages that you're telling yourself. And of course, prayer, very important, right? These are all resources that help. Okay, everybody with me so far? We got 22 minutes before we have to not even be in this building. What? Okay, all right, so the number 3 common ways that family of origin interferes with your marriage is living in opposite reaction to your family of origin. That one, this is a very complex one, okay? Living in opposite reaction to your family of origin. Basically, your life is, what you're doing in life is to be the opposite of what happened in your family. And you don't even realize it's happening sometimes. And sometimes you do. But usually it's both. You do realize some of it and you don't realize a lot of it, most of it. Like the iceberg image. If you have significant resentment, bitterness, or disregard for your family of origin, you may have unconsciously developed a general approach to life where you do the extreme opposite of everything you didn't like in your family of origin. It's like, have you guys ever heard the saying, when the pendulum swings the other way? You guys ever heard that? That's like the pendulum. So, you guys know what a pendulum is, like the thing on the clocks, right? And the grandfather clocks. And it just, like, it goes from one end to the other end, right? And so maybe you had a lot of extreme things you didn't like, or things that felt extreme that you didn't like. So you're just like, just going to swing the other way now. And now you're still not in balance. You're not centered. You're now over here because you were there growing up, or you felt like you were there growing up. I want to give you a real life example. I know a woman who has a very involved, this is her family now. This is her life now, and the family she's leading. She has a very involved process around deciding what to make for dinner each night for her family, because she had no say when she was growing up in what to eat for dinner. She always says, when I was young, I had no say. We have to eat whatever is served, and I hated it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying she hated something, and now she's living the opposite, right? Like the full opposite, right? Also, her children are number 1 above everything else because she was the least important in her family of origin. Or she felt that way. She has very elaborate birthday parties for her children because she didn't have any birthday parties growing up. Like, her birthday parties are planned for months in advance for her children. Months. And she was telling me all this stuff she does. I mean, I'm like, honestly, someone should be paying you for what you're doing. Like, it's unbelievable, these birthday parties that you're planning. And she's very particular about the way linens are set in the home, because her family of origin was very uncaring about how the home looked with respect to linens. Linens, like, you guys know what I'm talking about, like towels, right? And bed sheets and stuff, right? But she says it. She like there will be explosive arguments in the home because the linens aren't set up a certain way, because the birthday party isn't, her vision isn't being realized, right? Everyone else feels neglected because children are number 1, right? And the woman regularly says, because I never had that growing up, or because when I was growing up it was X. Now, that's the stuff that she knows she's living in reaction to. How about the stuff that she doesn't? For example, the role of women in the home. So if she grew up with women who had no voice in the home, she might swing the other way. That's unhealthy. But she might swing the other way where my voice must be the only voice heard, right? And she would do the same with her daughters, right? You guys can see you guys get, are you following me? Because this is like, you guys stay, all right. The perspective on men and reliance on them. I mean, you could say, we need to be independent, sure. But you also can't live if you're not allowing yourself to rely on anyone, especially your spouse, right? Like, that's you're going to be just lost. You're going to be abandoned, and you're the cause of your own abandonment, right? Also, philosophies on food and diet. Like, if I said this thing about the dinners, right? Also, it happens whenever I'm talking to this person, somehow, because the sessions are always at night, there's always a box of candy being consumed. A box of candy, a box. Like, God help us, it's a lot of food. It's not healthy. Every night, a whole box, right? So her marriage is struggling, but it's hard for her to change because she hates her family of origin so much. So, everybody with me on this? You guys with me? Okay. What to do about it? Sit with yourself and make a list of things you hated about your family life growing up. Remember, I told you at the beginning of this why it might be hard to make that list, right? There's a lot of emotional obstacles to making this list, right? And I also addressed any parents of children who have launched their children out, because I also want to sympathize with your position, because maybe you're like, oh my gosh, is it too late? No, it's not too late. If you're still alive, it's not too late, right? Ask yourself, have I made any unconscious promises to myself to never repeat those things? Then, have I ever become so anxious that I might repeat those things that I've overreacted when I felt like I'm doing something remotely similar? I'm going to give you some examples. Your dad yelled a lot and you hated it, so you stopped being assertive at all. Your parents were cheap and you hated it, so you splurge on your family. Your mom was very critical and you hated it, so you became overly permissive with your children. Your mom was abused by your dad and you hated it, so you became very invulnerable and untrusting of your husband. So, could that have happened? Is any of that going on? And then lastly, consider more balanced ways of being. In life, just remember, if you're ever being black and white about anything, you're probably wrong. Just remember that. Like, most things in life are not black and white, right? We even have, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we have a term called black and white thinking, black or white thinking, right? And usually people only think like there's only two options in life, in this decision. There's only two options. But usually it's not that, right? It's not that at all, right? Usually life is many dimensions, very complex, right? Don't be extreme. Be wiser and more sophisticated, right? Like basically, to sum this up, if your family was on this end of the spectrum, it's not black or white. It's not this or that. It's somewhere in the middle here, right? And the thing is, our minds are kind of, no offense, a little lazy. They don't want to do the work of finding the balance here. It's easy to just say, you know what, that was so bad, let me make sure that that never, ever happens. So I'm going to do this. But actually, now your children are going to have to be swinging the other way, right? The next generation, right? You don't want to be doing that, right? All right. We got one more, okay? Are you guys good so far? Okay? All right, good, awesome. This one is awesome. Man, this is such a heavy topic. Gosh, I'm like feeling it myself. Gosh. All right. Number 4, common ways of your family of origin interfering with your marriage, is unconscious carrying on of unhealthy family values, right? There's unhealthy family values, and you don't even realize it, but you're just carrying them on. And this, I'll give you some examples, but before that, this can be motivated by fear of disappointing your parents, whether dead or alive. Fear of being disloyal to parents that you have idolized, whether dead or alive. Or fear of losing a benefit that your parents offer. Maybe, for example, a financial benefit or a status benefit, like a social status benefit. Your parents may have, in your family growing up, may have been fixated on money. They may have been fixated on status and reputation. They may have been fixated on academic success. They may have been fixated on a legalistic spirituality, right? Like, oh, you gotta do the agbeya, you gotta go to church on Sundays, and that's all that was really discussed, right? Or go to confession, just make sure you're going to confession. Make sure Abuna approves of you as a human being. As long as Abuna's not complaining, we're good, right? But that means you gotta go talk to Abuna every once in a while. And then we're good. Everything else is fine as long as we're doing that. So some of these things, in and of themselves, like money is not in and of itself bad. Status and reputation, it's not bad in and of itself. Academic success is not bad in and of itself. Spirituality, of course, is not bad, right? But fixation on them is bad, right? If you are overly driven by unreasonable and unhealthy values, then there is a great opportunity cost. There's a great opportunity cost. The cost is that there are many other important things in life that you are giving too much capacity to that don't deserve it, right? Like, we need to make money. That's important. I mean, you have to be responsible and live and provide. Like, and you gotta do that, right? Also, there's a kind of like a level below which life is gonna be much harder, right? So you gotta work. But is that the focus of life? Are you just hammering into your kids, you gotta make money, right? And let me ask you, if that's the message you're hammering, what is the message that you're not spending time on? And that's the biggest question. What am I missing if I am so fixated on some unhealthy values? The other sad thing is you might have a false sense of progress and success because you're moving on the unhealthy values. You guys get what I'm saying? Like if academic success is something you're so fixated on and your kid is achieving that, you might think, oh, we're good. We're good. We're so good. Look at that report card, bro. Look at that report card. Look at that. Nobody can say anything to me. I'm a great parent, right? Or, my wife, like you're fixated on, oh, I want my wife to be able to go on trips with her girlfriends. Look at that, bro. She's going on the trips. She's going on the trips. You can't say anything to me. No, right? Maybe she's the reason why she's on the trips because she doesn't want to be with you, right? Who knows? But everybody, please go on trips. That's fine. It's totally fine. But be balanced. Be balanced. We got to be balanced, okay? So, what do you do about it? You have to sit with yourself and make a list of the things that you're spending most of your time doing. What are you doing most of the time? Just ask yourself, what's your day filled with, right? Next, align those things, and this is the hard part, align those things with the values in your life. Basically, why am I doing this? Like, why? Like, fine, if you say, oh, what I'm spending most of my day doing is, I don't know, probably working. A lot of people are working. But let's just say you're spending most of your day attending to your children's activities. Is that bad? Not necessarily. But why are you doing it? Which activities? Like, and why? Right? Like, maybe you've become so fixated on giving your children an extremely active life because you didn't have one. And now they're in sports, and they come home and they're tired. And nobody talks to anybody because the parents are tired driving, the kids are tired playing, and nobody's connecting. But your kids are very active. We got to be balanced, right? You got to be balanced, right? Maybe you and your spouse are so busy with a remodeling your home. Oh, or remodeling the home. Why? Like, you might have the most beautiful looking Instagrammable home, but your marriage is a disaster, right? And isn't that scary? Isn't that so scary? Like, that's so scary, right? So, what are you spending most of your time doing, and how do those things align with the values in your life? By the way, I just want to provide a little bit of grace here in case anyone thinks I'm being very critical. That balance in the short term is way harder to achieve than balance over the medium term, right? Like sometimes, like if you have an exam, you gotta study. Like you gotta study, and maybe that will take up a lot of your time, right? But just make sure that you're not just going from exam to exam to exam to exam, and you're not making any time for anything else, right? That's so you could see like kind of how you could fall out of balance very quickly. So make a list of things you're spending your time doing. Align those things with the values in your life, which is the why, the purpose of those things. Then ask yourself, what would life be like if I didn't care as much about these things? That is a very valuable question. It's the question of what isn't, what is being missed, of the cost, the opportunity cost. Is there a positive alternative? And finally, ask yourself, what values are not on this list? What could I be missing completely? It's very important as a couple and family to be aligned on core values. Otherwise, you're working in conflicting directions. So ultimately, when you're done, you need to share this list with your spouse. Like, this is what I'm doing. Are we on the same page here? Because if you're not, you guys are doing a lot of work in opposite directions. Like, and time doesn't stop passing. Like, time keeps going, right? All right, it's 11:53. Any questions, comments, disagreements, concerns from any of this? I'm saving some time for a little bit of questions. Yes. Sure.
You ask our parents, like, if they thought they're doing the best they can, but we can probably point more to like the mistakes that they made as a kid. Our kids can do the same to us when we're parents. Like, how you, like, we're all trying to do our best.
Yeah. So the question is if, like, if we talk to our parents, they would probably say we were doing the best we could. And now, we're doing the best we could as parents. And our kids probably, when they're younger, when they grow up, they're going to say the same thing about us. I just want to challenge that completely, right? Don't make it so. Don't make it so. Like, we will make mistakes, sure. But we can't ignore the fact that doing your best may not be good enough. And just because you're doing your best doesn't mean you're operating at your full potential. But to get to your full potential, you need help, right? I'll give you an example. Just any professional sports player, they have a lot of, like, really good qualities. Like, for a number of reasons, they're really good. But then they get a coach. They play with people at the elite level. And they find themselves operating at their full potential, right? And that's what we need to do. I remember very vividly a wedding that I was at, a very, very healthy father giving a speech at his son's wedding. And he was giving the speech, and at the end of the speech, he said, and I pray that you will be 10 times better than me one day. And his son just shook his head, like, basically, like, there is no way I could be better than you. And that really touches my heart, actually. That in terms of our parents, like, we, as a child of your parents, take the good, acknowledge the good, and acknowledge the bad. And forgive anything bad. Like, God commanded us to forgive, right? And please forgive, because if you don't forgive, you're blinding yourself, and you're going to carry it forward, most likely, right? And for you as a parent, don't make it so that your kids say, my dad could have done better, my mom could have done better. Don't. Commit to that. The problem is we're not even committing to that. We're just committing to working hard. And most of us are good at working hard. But we're not doing everything we should be doing, and sometimes we're working too hard on some things that we don't, and we're not working hard on other things, right? Like, for example, when I said communicate love explicitly and clearly, there's many parents who they'll go to work 16 hours a day, but you tell them to say I love you to their kid, they don't do it. I remember also very vividly, this is probably like 15 years ago, this also had a big impression on me. I was sitting we did at our church back in New York, we did like a father-son dinner, right? We didn't do that thing very often, but we did it. And I remember, the speaker was like, hey guys, you got to affirm your sons. Literally, it's fathers sitting next to their sons. So you got to affirm your sons and tell them you love them and that they're doing a good job. And then some father raised his hand. I remember this so clearly. He said, why do I have to tell my son I love him? I'm working 2 jobs. Like, don't you see? Doesn't he see how hard I'm working? And I couldn't stop looking at the son's face. I was like, oh man, like this is, that son ended up in a lot of trouble, like a lot of trouble. And so I want to summarize my answer, I just want to challenge that, don't underestimate yourselves, my beloved brothers and sisters. Your heart is in the right place, but you may not realize it, that you're not doing the best you can. Because you can do better. You have a lot of potential. And everything you think you're not achieving, you probably can achieve it with God's grace and help. Okay. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Thank you.